I'm really excited for you guys to enjoy this next session. The conference has been so amazing so far. I've never been to this conference, so it's a good time. But why don't you come up on stage? I have with us today, we have Nadine Damblon, and she's the co-founder and CEO of HydroMiner, a green cryptocurrency mining operation. So,
Hi.
Nice to have you.
Thanks for the introduction.
And we also have Dino Osmanovic. And Dino is a former CTO and current GM at Symphony, a culture-driven technology house that empowers global entrepreneurs to make their vision their reality. And we were talking about a few things, and he's got some cool projects he's working on. So welcome, Dino.
Thank you. Thank you.
And finally, we have a Forbes 30 under 30 with us today, Chris Obereder. Did I say that right?
Obereder.
Obereder,
yeah, cool.
My bad. English is hard. A serial entrepreneur and CMO at TV2.com, a new gateway to broadcast television that guarantees direct interactions between consumers, advertisers, and content providers for a fair and transparent television environment. I want in. That sounds really, really good. Welcome. So with my role at Pluralsight, as I work inside of the product and experience org, so this idea of developer-driven entrepreneurship is really important to me. It's something that I work with every single day. And we have three of the experts on this topic with us today. And what I'd like to do is let's just get a little bit deeper with your background and then tell us why this topic is so important to you to start it off. And let's start with Nadine, and then we'll just kind of go down to Dino and Chris.
Okay. I'm actually from the arts background, so no coding background. But I co-founded together with my sister last year the HydroMiner company. We tried to tackle the carbon problem of the Bitcoin mining and found the solution that we put the hardware into hydropower stations, so we have a clean and cheap energy source there. Yeah, now we're a team of 15 people already, and also have a lot of developers in our team because we just developed a mining platform where we offer cloud mining. And I mean, it's in this blockchain sphere, it's like this, the hierarchy is like turned upside down, so the developers are actually the stars and the bosses of the companies. I work with a few projects that are entirely developer-driven, where they have everything in their hands and they are the new chefs. So excuse me, a lot is changing in this sphere, and yeah, I'm happy to be part of it.
Sure, thank you. As Chris mentioned, I'm Dino from Symphony. Symphony is a technology-driven company. We are doing software development mostly for our clients located in Bay Area. Currently, we have 3 offices, 1 in Sarajevo and 2 in Serbia, Novi Sad and Belgrade. We do interesting projects. We do different approaches per client, which I will share afterwards. I'm already in Symphony for 10 years. I started as a developer. I was a team lead. Ended up as a CTO, and currently I'm general manager of Symphony Sarajevo.
Nice.
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot for the intro, Chris. And basically, I lived in the Silicon Valley for the last 2 years, started a lot of different tech companies. Most failed, some worked, or a few worked. And yeah, there I'm always confronted with a lot of developers. In Silicon Valley, I worked for Discord. That one worked. Many others failed, and one, like I started with gaming, that worked well for some, and then I sold one company to Disney, that was Steve the Jumping Dinosaur, a funny game. So like I did a lot of different things and saw how Silicon Valley is working and how they're developing new products, and I'll share some ideas there today. Yeah, and now I'm doing mainly crypto, and that's what Chris mentioned, TV2, but today I'll focus on like developer-driven entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Nice. So as you can see, there's some pretty good different backgrounds here. And to kick off the questions, I'd love to know, what is the role of a developer in keeping the company current and up to date?
Okay, I can start. Okay, as a company, we grew. In the last 10 years, we tried different management approaches. We tried different stuff to how to build our business, how to shape our business. At the end, as in most situations in your life, it ends up that solution is just around the corner. So we just had to check with our developers, what actually they want to do, what kind of projects, what kind of strategies. I can say that especially in the last few years, we shaped our business and guided our business development team to provide us with the projects that are interesting to developers. We also are using technologies that are developers like. We use approaches to development which are in focus in modern age for developers. So that's...
Yeah, I mean, from a management point of view, I would say that the ideas of the developers are extremely valuable to the management, but I mean, there's always this problem from the regulator side that I try to empower them and try to give them as much freedom as possible, but I have to restrict them with certain things that I have to push through. So I mean, it's always this fight between okay, here's the freedom for the developer, and I can give you that because my hands are tied. So, but the ideas definitely come from the developer side more and more, especially in the blockchain sphere where I come from. So it's completely it's completely in their hands to push the projects forward. I mean, that's from what I experienced.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Nadine. And I also think that, for example, developers, you always have to be careful that they develop a product for the mainstream audience, and because they're sometimes, if you just let them do it themselves, then they develop a product that they think is mainstream, but actually it's not fitting, it's not working with mainstream audiences. So I've seen that sometimes, but in Silicon Valley we just say, like, developers are king, and give them a voice and enable them to also participate. And I think that's really important, so we should try to do similar here in Europe. Yeah.
So I like that you bring up that you need to have the culture there, but then there's also this give and take that you mentioned, and developers are king, but maybe they're not always the exact audience. So how do you know when development should be involved in the strategy? Like how do you make those calls?
It's always like a balance. You need to leverage. You cannot drive purely an organization based on developers' inputs. So it must be like we in our organization we try to leverage and to find the balance between what actual our demand is. We at the end of the day we earn our money and salaries based on our clients are paying us, right? So we take those inputs, but also our developers are telling us what actually ideal project would look like, and we try to balance those two things.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm supporting a Bitcoin hard fork, and I mean, there's the situation like this, that the developers have everything in their hands and they handle millions of dollars, and then again, I mean, they don't put money into the projects. That are the investors that try to develop it. Then they don't bear the risk. I mean, that's still on the management side. I mean, even if it's developer driven, it's the question if the developers are real entrepreneurs or not, because that's always the difference. I mean, if you're hired in a company and you work for other people, or if you say, okay, I'm going to do my own project, but of course there are ways to empower them in a company as well. But yeah, in the blockchain space, it's a little bit different because everybody is there, entrepreneur almost.
Yeah, I think definitely it's important to have a good mix, and if it's too developer-driven, then this can also lead to issues. So it may be, like, for example, if it's too developer-driven, then there's probably less functionality in the whole space, because like if it's too, like, functionality could be less or could be more depending on, like, the marketing team, like myself, we always dream of things at night and we come up with ideas, and often they're not really feasible, or they take like years to develop and we don't know about that. So we just tell them about it and have many ideas, and often they don't work. So I think that it's important to have a good mix. Then they can bring you back to reality and tell you that this is actually not feasible. You're just dreaming. So it's always good to have the mix, I think.
Yeah, so I like that you guys have all clearly explained the value that development is bringing now to all of our products and services. And I'd love to just zoom out just a little bit for a minute, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on what would the state of products be like and services if developers weren't empowered? What would you imagine that would look like?
Yeah, well, from my perspective, because we are a company we have over 130 developers, and but we work with different clients. It's over 20 projects at the moment, so we have relatively small teams, and each individual project has some specifics. It depends on the project. From project to project, the influence of developers is different, but I would say in average it's really high. Because we have even teams where developers, they have some hack days when they build the entire functionality for a week. And like 1.5, 2 months ago, we, one really big project, our guys implemented the entire feature, and it was released last 2 weeks or something. So it's really, in some cases, it's really strong influence in the functionality. Sometimes even it's backend system, some optimization or security improvements will take place. It depends, but I would say in average it's really high.
Yeah, I also think that like if you don't empower them, then technology, they know the new technologies. I can buy the new iPhone, but I don't know what it can do actually. They know more about that, and then so therefore, I think there would be a lot less functionality if you don't empower them, and so it's definitely important to empower them. And yeah, for example, just to give you an example, if you watch the last season of Silicon Valley, like we over there, we watched it all the time with the whole company together, and in the last episode, the CEO, the whole team leaves, the whole developer team leaves, they don't believe in him anymore, and then he says, then I'll do it myself, and then he starts coding for days. Afterwards, he fades, and he's like going to a hospital. But then the whole team comes back because they see, okay, he basically finished what we should have done, the whole 30 developer team, in 1 week. He finished in 4 days by himself, and that shows, like, he's a coder. I'm not a coder. I can't do that stuff. But that shows if you empower them and they can really do something, then anything is possible. And that's what we try to do there, empower them, be a team, and then really work together. And then that's what they're doing all day long, and yeah, so.
I'm on your side, that they are of course a driving creative force, but sometimes they're so creative that the consumers can't use it yet, or yeah, grasp the idea behind the concept, because they're just too much forward thinking. So there's sometimes a gap as well between the audience that needs to be educated about it and what it can do, and the ideas of the developers. So we should do more. Yeah, we should try to close the gap as well there, I think.
What ways have you seen, any tips that you've done to bridge that gap?
I mean, I just know my father has a software company, and he developed 20 years ago a technology that would have a lot of people fired in other companies, and so he stood there and couldn't sell his product, which was really a great one, but nobody wanted it. And now today there are others on the market, and it's widely known. But 20 years ago, I mean, he almost lost his company. So I mean, that's the thing that I'm working about, and he tried to. Yeah, it's hard because he's not a marketing person, and nobody in the company was. They were all developers, so they had a tough job on that. I try to make it better now. Let's see.
Yeah, typically developers, they don't have a lot of issues learning some technical things and some new frameworks or languages. What we try to encourage and expose them more to the clients and to better understand their business and their goal. So that will bridge that gap you mentioned.
So you're saying, yeah, I mean, you have this highly talented skill set. It's extremely valuable, and if you bring them into and have a seat at the table where the decisions are being made, then you can kind of bridge that gap. So create more of the cross-functional team is kind of what I hear you saying.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's really important to give them insight as much as possible, and to share also knowledge from the other departments, so they get an overall view and can then create products that fit the best into the company or into the strategy. Yeah, but it's a tough.
it's tough when you have like isolated UX, UI team, you have development team, you have, I don't know, business team, and you have these different worlds. And then you have a lot of issues, a lot of communication between and problems at the end. So when you bridge that, when you put them all together and work as a team, it brings much more value and it's much more productive, and at the end of the day, it's much more profitable, right?
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about this. What does a team look like? Could you describe that a little bit, like this team that you're talking about? It's
again different per project, but essentially we like to have like different types of developers, UX UI designers. In some projects, of course, data scientists or whatever is needed, and they work like cross-functional as a team.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, there, just to add to that, Dino, like the difference I see, if you walk in the office here, usually you have like the marketing team in one room, then you have the design team in one room, you have the developers in another room, and if you walk into an office over there, the office space looks very different already. You can see it's like one room, everyone sits in there, and the CEO is on the same level, and they all sit together. Even the CEO sits on a table with you, and you're just a junior marketing person like myself or something like that. So that shows like flatten the hierarchy. There's no hierarchy over there. Here there's a lot of hierarchies. The CEO doesn't talk to a junior developer or something like that. And like ideas can also come from the junior developer. So that's, if you enable the everyone to speak up, then that's good. And also they have a lot of rituals. Every day there's a stand up. The whole company stands up until like you have 100 employees. Everyone stands up. And everyone says a few words of what they will do that day. So that's basically people say what they're going to do, and then in the end you actually do it, because if you don't do it, you kind of disappoint your whole, it's like a family. So yeah, there's a lot of, I think that we can learn from that, and that's what I've seen over there. Yeah.
Maybe just to say a few words about, I mean, it's the way we actually scaled. 2.5 years ago, we had 35 developers. And we had high business demand, and we decided we have to scale. We need more manpower, and we had choice to hire additional 100 people or so and expand that way. But since we had this culture and the way we interact with each other and the teamwork, each person, we knew each other quite well in Sarajevo office. Decision we made at that point was again driven by developers, because they said, we wouldn't like to be like 200 people company on 5 floors, not knowing each other. And what we did, what turned out as a really good decision, we opened a first office in Belgrade, and we kind of copy pasted that what we have in Sarajevo in Belgrade. After that, we did it in Novi Sad, and now we are doing that in Skopje. So it's actually, we grew 100 people in 2 years, and that didn't have a major impact on our culture and the way we do our business.
Yeah, good point. And Chris, what you said to flatten the hierarchy, I to some extent agree with you, but I mean to completely take it out never worked for me. And I, at this point, I mean only with 15 people, really think that it's needed to some extent, of course. And I know the Google and I don't know Silicon Valley companies that that have the spirit that you described, but I think there as well is some hierarchy left, and it's really tough there from what I heard as well. So I mean, you have to deliver. I mean, you can choose when you deliver, but I mean, there are certain goals, like for your task groups as well, I think that have to be done. So.
Yeah, at the end you have to deliver, definitely. Like even the fire and hire policy, like you get fired 2 weeks, like it's 2 weeks basically. And I thought I get fired like twice, but then my boss got fired, like 2 of my bosses got fired. And it's like they say like you're out, and then 2 weeks later you're out. So it's like they like don't come back on Monday in 2 weeks, and you're like, whoa, what should I do then? Like I never got fired, but some of the people I know got fired, so it's quite stressful. But if you look at the company in the office, you don't see who the CEO is and who is the junior developer. The CEO sits like the developers there and just works as well. So it's not so clear there. Mm-hmm. It feels like there's no hierarchy, but at the end of the day, of course, there is some kind of hierarchy. Yeah.
You've each kind of touched a little bit on culture, and if I'm sitting out there and listening to these different perspectives, I'm wondering what type of little takeaway or tip or advice would you give to have your culture support this developer-driven entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I would say two things. One is communication. So we encourage developers to talk to each other and talk to us about the problems or issues or suggestions. And another one would be transparency, in terms that we really face our, basically main account managers for our clients are our developers. So they are mostly involved with the project, with the ongoing development, and they manage our clients almost, not exclusively, but in major part. So that transparency, we don't have like some layers between developers and our clients, which will bridge that communication or management or whatever. Doing that in that transparent way gives them more accountability for what they are doing actually. So that way, I think we are pushing in that direction, in direction of having that culture and developer-driven entrepreneurship actually.
I mean, in the field where I work in, it's mostly about trust, I would say. Otherwise, we can work together because the developers are handling private keys. They're handling basically everything that's worth something in the company. So without that, it's not possible. And that's strange that from the blockchain idea, I mean, everybody's included and nobody is at the outside. But then when it comes to the people you choose to work for you, you again find yourself in the need to find somebody you trust. And then, I mean, people think sometimes simply, again, in your social context and levels. So, I mean, it's a constant challenge to go out and look for the broader picture and to find people that you can really trust there, because it's all about that.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, just in general, again, I would say encourage communication and flat hierarchies if possible at all.
So trust, communication, transparency, and we've also talked a little bit about giving a seat at the table to developers. And in order to do that, you really need to be on the top of your craft, on the top of your game as a developer. What do you do to encourage that, to empower a developer to stay on top of their game?
I mean, there's the possibility of ownership, for example. I mean, quite a lot of projects work with that in the blockchain sphere. But I mean, you can't always give percentages of the company to a developer just because you want him to work great for one project. So you have to balance it there as well. But I mean, yeah, to keep them close to the management, I think, is one point of really give them the power to be good at their job and develop.
Except what I mentioned before, it's like proving them that you are listening to them, and acknowledging and basically working with them and their problems. So they are aware that when they say something, when they suggest something, that somebody will accept that and will somehow implement it. I mentioned the case with the expansion, and we clearly listened to our developers basically in that case, and it turned out as a really good case.
Yeah.
And then also basically if they do something right, or if something is finished, or like the project is finished, then like shout out the people and say like they did a great job and all of that, encouraging them. And there also we had in California, if you do something really well, you get a crown, kind of, that's what they're saying. And then everyone in the company knows who it is that day, and that person stands up, everyone is clapping, and if like 100 people clap, you feel like really good, and you try to get there again. So I think that's not like you increase their pay or something, but you actually make them feel really valued, and then the CEO says like, great job to our junior developer, Max, he finished this today, and for him it's really significant. So I think doing something like that is fantastic.
Yeah, I really love that appreciation, like really authentic, appreciation for work. When I've listened to talks by Spotify, by Uber, some of those companies, they talk a lot about their internal education and the way they keep everyone refined on their craft. What role does that play in your mind for keeping developers empowered?
Yeah, education is definitely the core of, I mean, our industry is based on education. So every year or every day, actually, we learn something new. We somehow assume technical advancement and technical education. What we are trying to, as I mentioned, enforcing this communication and the feedback sharing. It looks like a simple thing, but it turned out as a bit more complex, because people are sometimes not willing to share the feedback. And when you hear things, it's usually too late. So we have to proactively push them or engage them in different ways to share the feedback on time regarding project, regarding their advancement, technology, whatever.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I think the sharing aspect that Dino just mentioned, I think if you focus on the team and it feels more like a team effort, then I think there's more sharing happening. But if it's too, also I think if it's more like a team, some members won't be so stressed out if you work together. But if it's like everyone is working for themselves, then some people might be really stressed. They might be close to burnout. But if you're doing it more like a team, then I think it's a better, definitely better.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, the idea is great, but in reality, I mean, a lot of people work in different countries, and I mean, you don't have the chance to educate them. I mean, you could probably set up like some weekly meeting or like a call with them, but it's really hard because they're shadowed groups and they don't know each other, and you have to connect them over the whole world. So a lot of startups work like that. So ideally, it's a good idea, but in reality, it's really hard to do. Yeah, often.
That's very true. What's your take on education then? How to keep people refined? Is it simply like making sure they have the right projects so they learn just in time, or is there another approach that you feel is important?
Yeah, it's project-based, and before we enter a project, we have to meet one time to see if it fits it, because that's really still important. Otherwise, it's hard, and you just connect over Skype, and you know how this works. It's not so good.
Yeah, distributed teams,
yeah.
right? Yeah. So I'd like to switch gears just a little bit and talk about some of the warning signs. How do you protect against not having a culture of? How do you protect against your culture going bad or not empowering developers?
Yeah, there are definitely some signs of organization that goes in that direction. For instance, ignoring some technical comments and technical suggestions from the developer side. So typically, at certain point, we switched most projects to having pull requests, doing code reviews, etc. In some cases, we inherit some code base, and sometimes it's not in the best shape. And if we keep it that way, that would be a bad thing. That's why I'm not saying we are not accepting that the projects with a bad code base, but we don't accept to keep on working on that. So if it will be like a 2-3 months timeline to replace that or to improve that, then it's fine. But if we are going to work that way forever or next few years, then we don't accept that.
Did that ever happen to you as you were a developer? Were you working on something and you were ignored?
Many times. I think anyone who says different will lie.
Yeah. It definitely seems like it would kill entrepreneurship really quickly.
Yeah. I mean, the developers, they like to do things in the right way, and sometimes they are requesting things that are too far away, so we have to meet in between. But essentially, we have to follow that path and go in that direction, to have like a clean code, to have automated testing, to have unit testing, to have continuous integration and delivery, to have pull requests and code gets reviewed frequently, to have DevOps teams set up, and so on.
Yeah, that's the case. And also, I think with that, if it's endangered, the developer-driven entrepreneurship, if there's like no more communication happen, and communication is like breaking apart, and the developers are sitting in one room and thinking like, what are we doing here? And they're just getting orders, and they can't say like, can we change this or something? I think that's the danger if it's too split up in terms of the company, and if it's no open communication, then this is a big problem. So, yeah.
And as well, if the pressure is too high, I mean, sometimes it's it's all on them, and then just nothing works anymore. But yeah, it's for the whole company. I mean, if the atmosphere is good and the project is running, fine. But I mean, every day there are tons of problems, and you just need people to go through with this. And I need developers who can handle stressful situations as well. So I mean, there are certain qualifications that they need to bring as well to keep it going forward, because yeah, problems happen
Yeah, essentially
most of the time.
It goes in both ways. Sometimes when it's too much pressure, too much to do in a short period, they get overburned and you have issues. On the other side, we had situations where things goes too slow in some cases. And there are too small changes that take too much time. Like when you work with a large enterprise, you face with a long decision chain on their end. So in order to deploy some trivial things, it takes take weeks sometimes. And that developers complain on that as well. So both ends are not okay. So we have to find the good one.
You mentioned, in hearing you talk, you're talking about pressure, and I can imagine, starting up your own company, that's got to bring with it a lot of pressure, and I know you guys have experienced the same thing. How do you mitigate that? How do you handle knowing it needs to be a balance? What have you done?
I mean, I just try to shield them off from the pressure we get from the customers. I mean, they basically see it because, I mean, it all happens in chat rooms today or online, so they see when they made a mistake, and I try to get that from them away so they can work in a stress-free environment and deliver the solution real quick, because we can't do anything most of the times. Our hands are tied there, so it's all on their shoulders. It
Shield
is,
what
but
you can.
yeah,
that makes
try
sense.
to soften it a bit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you guys ever encountered any of that? I'm sure with the pressures.
Yeah, basically, if it's too pressured, the working environment, some people also leave. I've seen that. Especially in the US, they're really developers in general are scarce resources, of course, so they know they can switch if they feel too pressured, and if they're always stressed out and it's not a team effort, then they also leave. So that's also dangerous if you just pressure them so much that they then leave the company, and that's a big problem then for the company, of course. So.
Yeah, yes, there is always pressure, right? We just need to balance and to take that into account. But sometimes, in some cases, we had situations where developers are suggesting something, some change or some advancement, and where they put pressure on themselves as well. I mean, they wanted to invest their own time, basically, to improve things. And that's a good sign, but you have to control that as well, because they can get overburned as well. So it's a trade-off, but you don't have to really, I mean, it's good to listen to them in that case, but if you let them invest too much of their own time in something that maybe makes no sense from the business perspective, if that project or product will shut down in 2 months, then it makes no sense to do that. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've seen that in the teams that I work with as well. You get so many engineers so passionate about what they're doing, and they'll just keep working. And as a leader, you need to know when to cool that off a little bit.
Okay.
I love this balance that you guys are all talking about, and it reminds me of, I've heard this psychologist metaphor for behavioral psychology with if you turn a red light on and you're on a battleship, then everyone immediately goes to the task that they've been trained to do, and that removes all creativity, and that's intentional. And I think what I hear you guys saying is that is not the pressure that we're talking about. You need to find the type where you're not turning off creativity, which would in effect kill developer and entrepreneurship in and of itself. So it's that balance.
Correct.
So what other thoughts do you guys have? The final question before we turn it to the audience about the productivity versus profitability.
It's definitely an important balance, otherwise you don't exist for long. So there, I think it's again, I'm always a big supporter of teams. I think that's the most important, and that's what they've driven into me as well, is team, and we did every month we did a off-site, going somewhere with them. It feels like a family. It doesn't feel like a family when they kick you out, of course, but then they're quite harsh, but until then you feel like they're all your brothers and sisters, and you fight with them, and it's like really like that. And the thing is there also, it's always in the same town kind of. There's 2 other companies doing the same thing. It's always at the same time, it's the same thing, and they're like, you have to basically be faster than them, and then that company gets the funding, gets huge, and yeah, so I think the team effort is again important.
Yeah. I think those 2 terms are not excluding each other. Actually, they are quite complementary. So if you have a motivated team that likes to come to their work, like enjoys environment, enjoys the team, and enjoys the technology he's working on, I think my assumption is that person will be productive. And if he is productive, I guess it will be profitable at the end of the day as well. So it's somehow the same package.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, we have a couple of really good questions I'd love to take. The first one there, would you encourage your developers to create useful and innovative things outside of the company environment and potentially sell them back to the company? It's a good question.
Depends on the product, yeah. I think that's a great idea, actually. But the problem is then they become their own business and don't work for you anymore if they're good. Yeah, no, that's a great idea, actually. And I mean, in some cases, they often have side projects running or work on some other stuff at home. And of course, it's valuable to your company. It's useful. I think that's great.
But relevancy is important to you.
Of course, I mean, if the job is not done, I mean, I can't
If they're working on hot
hire
tubs
them anymore.
and you're Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, Bitcoin is always on top. No, yeah, of course, but I think that gives them also a lot of power for the job they are doing if they think they can bring some extra money into the company. So it's
Many of our developers, they do freelance or they do side projects as well. We don't have problems with that, and because our model is a bit different, we don't have our own product. We are not investing currently in a product. So yeah, maybe if some good idea comes to us and present it and we like it, maybe that can change. But currently we are focused on providing best service we can and things that we do best, and that's the coding.
Yeah, I would say I wouldn't encourage them. Like, you can't stand up and say like, hey, everyone, please do something different on weekends. Because then it feels like, oh, this is going down or something. It feels like the ship is sinking. So I wouldn't maybe encourage it, but if they do it, I would say it's good. It helps them to learn new things. Sometimes they even do things they don't know yet and do it as a test. Like, they develop something, let's say on the blockchain. They've never done it, and that's a side project. So they learn something new, so that's good.
Yeah, that's a good point. I love this third question here. How do you deal with slackers? Slackers don't exist, do they?
Slackers are like lazy
Slackers are
people,
like, yeah, not getting their job done. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's a tough one.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about time. I mean, you can give them either 2 weeks or 3 months, but in the end, if they don't deliver, I mean, you only have one choice then to fire them because they're.
So I hear
there's
you
no
saying
extra money in the company. I mean, from the management perspective now, I mean, especially for a startup, you need people that come to you and say, oh, I would love to work in your company. These people you have to take, because otherwise there's not so much money. A lot of time and pressure goes into the work. So with those people, it's hard to develop a company, I would say.
Yeah, we do care about technical quality of the software we deliver, and like in our selection process, for instance, when people are doing technical challenge, we don't actually at all look at the functionality almost. We look at the code he wrote. Sometimes it doesn't work, but the code he wrote is good, error handling is good, some patterns are used and so on. And that way, I think that doing things in a quick and dirty way is not the way we would like to see our products moving forward.
And I think also there's always a reason why there are slackers. Like, then you should think, why are they not so interested in the project? Maybe it's something that they don't like, or maybe we're not maybe the company is doing something wrong as well for that. Yeah, I think that's sometimes the case. But in general, if it's for over long term, like in California, they just get fired after 2 weeks. Like, that's their reality. So usually they're not slackers. So yeah, you work every 2 weeks, you have to perform, otherwise you're out. And if you're sick for like a week, you're like, oh man, hopefully I'm not out. So I never got sick over there. So yeah, that's the reality.
You willed yourself away from being sick.
You go there even if you're really sick. Yeah.
I like your thought, though, of being a little introspective at times, and perhaps there's something we can learn from someone that's interesting as well. Yeah. I like this other question here of what is the best motivation for the developer? Is it financial? Is it something else? What are your thoughts?
Well, one of the main drivers are of course of course money, but the developers are really well paid. I mean, in the region, in the world in general. So I think this decisions which company to go to is mostly based now on a technology, on the projects, on generally quality of the work and the potentially what that person will learn there. So that's I think the leading factor. Of course, the financial is really important. At the end of the day, we all work for our salaries, right?
Yeah, but I think I don't totally agree with that. I think many of the developers I met, they're not so going for the cash, really. They want to work on something that they believe in. And I think if they believe in something and another company comes and says, like, we pay you 10% more, then they still say, like, no, I'm not interested. Like, they are really driven on, like, purpose. And they're not the ones that then, like, if they earn something, you ask them, what did you buy? Something? And they're like, no, I just keep it in the bank. And they don't, like, they have the same T-shirts and stuff. They don't care about that so much. They want to build something that brings value to some people. So I think.
And that's true. A lot of developers we work with, they just do it because they want to. I mean, they have bitcoins all over the world, and they have so much, money that they don't care about it anymore. So that's not the incentive. I mean, it's just about the idea, about the ideology. I mean, behind the blockchain technology that drives them forward, and that with that you can trick them into your company. Otherwise, it's not possible.
They'll just leave, yeah, if you trick them.
Just never come, yeah.
So don't trick them.
Yeah.
Cool. We have one more question. Should a CEO of a 200-person company still write code? Interesting question.
I would say he should be able to read code.
Or she.
That's really important.
Yeah.
I don't care about that, but no. Yeah, I mean, reading would be a good thing because otherwise it's really hard these days. I mean, our lawyer knows how to read code. I mean, everybody who works with us, I mean, except me. No. But yeah, that's really important. I mean, to write, maybe that's a better question for you.
Well, company of 200 people, I guess they write a lot of code per day. So even if he can read, I don't think he has time to read all that. I think he needs to understand conceptually and architecturally what is the roadmap for the company, technical roadmap, project roadmap, but not necessarily to write. I mean, I don't think he will have time to actually code himself.
Yeah, I think it's mainly a time issue. It would be nice, like, for the whole team, you know, when he writes the code and everyone is like, that's the CEO's code, check it out, he has a bug or something, it sucks, or like, that would be fun and cool, I think, but it's just, logistically, he gets 1,000 emails probably per day or something, so it's hard to. But it would be nice hackathon, you know, on the weekend if he has to do something or he does something and everyone can watch it. So it's like he must be the motivate and the visionary. So yeah.
Great. Well, we're out of time. I really appreciate your guys' questions and thank you for the panelists. They're awesome. So let's give them a hand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.